Hello everyone, once again another updated deck profile. After so long for support, and really needed support from set 13 of the Dress anime, we finally got more Almajestar support, and it's actually needed support from set 2. And I am really happy with it because I really liked the deck concept when it first came out, but unfortunately due to consistency issue, it was really hard to play. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But now with some new support, and actually good support that could directly soul charge your key pieces from your deck, this deck got so much better. And of course, if you don't have the one card, you might be still screwed and you might still play like old Almajestar, but overall, it's just so much better now. So this deck focuses around, like realistically, it focuses around Masque. And overall, when it was first originally introduced, it was of course Astroea Unica, where you just basically need 3 crits bound, but with Masque, you want a little more so you can get more power. And here's the inherent weakness of the deck. You need to be soul blasting crits. Of course, it could be any trigger for extra power, but mainly crits because crits is what actually drives your extra power. Because crits is actually what makes the deck run. And that is an inherent weakness of the deck, but thanks to this one new support, it actually helps the deck so much just with the consistency. But other than that, I really like the design, the witch-like design as well. It just looks really colorful. And Bico is finally actually pretty decent here. But of course, it's going to be some added other cards with it, but still, it's actually now pretty decent. Along with the Unica itself. Unica was originally always been the first ride, and then you use Bico to try to finish the game, even though it doesn't completely play the same playstyle with Unica. But now it kind of works a lot better with more consistency, and it now kind of does. But in that, let's start off with the deck profile. So first off, ride line. So Muchi, you can pick whatever starter you want. But the grade 1, you must run because it's Sword to Sparta, where when it's rolled upon by the grade 2 Dyna, and yes, it has the equals in the name, but ignore that, you can soul charge 2, and if you soul charge a crit, you draw a card. That soul charge crit doesn't really matter. I mean, as long as you have the soul, it's not too bad, especially for Bico, but you mainly still want to soul charge the crit, hopefully. But you mainly use it because of Dyna. But the second skill is also very helpful because it's act once per turn. If your opponent's Vanguard is at least grade 3, you can bind a trigger unit from your soul and plus 10k. That one extra bind can even be one of your crits, and I will tell you why later. But that one extra bind is just very helpful because it does increase your count. In which we go to Dyna, where when rolled upon by an Almajestar, you can call this along with the Sparta from Soul. That's why you want to run it. And then the second skill is that act once per turn. If your Vanguard's Almajestar, you can count last one to put 2 trigger units from your drop zone and put them to soul and plus 5k. And here's a way to put stuff to soul. The old support used to be all soul charging from the drop zone, so that was a little bit of an issue, but now we got more deck soul charging. And this skill kind of becomes really irrelevant thanks to another card as well. And you kind of end up binding your important triggers anyway, so you more likely will not be using this skill, but it's there just in case. And last time I was making deck profile on this, I was using the Omnia Gruzio ride line because that one can choice soul charge the crit from your deck, but now I find myself needing the extra units more, so I end up running this. In which we now go to the new grade, grade 3, Astroea Unica, where, let's go on the second skill first because that one triggers the first one. When this card attacks, you can Soul Blast 3, bind all the critical triggers that you Soul Blast for the cost, and then perform all the following depending on how many crits. If you have at least 1, choose one of your opponent's rear crits and retire it. If you have at least 2, crit plus 1. If you have at least 3, drive plus 1. And here's the part where you need to be Soul Blasting crits. And more crits means more power. And obviously, it originally went from if you have 3, you're pretty much all good. But now with Bico, you want at least 4 because Bico wants more for more power and 4 is a good number. But this used to be like an okay type skill and it's kind of free with all the soul charging. But now it's just, you don't really use it for the skill unless if you have to. But the first skill is that when you Soul Blast a trigger unit, choose one of your units plus 5k. So every Soul Blasted unit gives you a choice of 1 unit for plus 5k, which is pretty nice. You're going to Soul Blast 3 crits, which will be 3 units. Just overall pretty good free power right there with some extra crit pressure, retire, and a drive, which isn't too bad. But other than that, there's really not much to say about it. And then for the main deck, first off, 3 more copies of the regular Astroea Unica, not for Persona riding, but more so for the Masque, because Masque still needs to remove its old identity. In which, before we go to the Masque unit itself, I run 3 Masque of Hydrogram, just so you can get your consistency to ride to Masque, but you don't want to run too many of these. And also lets you search your Masque, but more so you do not want to be using Masque of Hydrogram to search your Masque. You hopefully want to be able to put this to the drop zone and draw the Masque unit itself, because there's another order card in the deck and you don't want to restrict yourself from playing the 1 order per turn. In which we go to Bico Masque itself. So first off, can only be ridden on top of Astroea unit. So meaning that you of course cannot just put it in your ride deck, of course, because it's Masque unit. So first off, it can remove its old identity, aka a version that is not a copy of herself, from anywhere from your hand, soul, or drop, or even on the field. And then choose one of your opponent's rear guards, retire, and drive +1. So you still get the drive +1 and retire, but you do lose the crit, which is unfortunate, but thanks to 1 order card, it is going to solve this problem. In which, when this card attacks, you can counterblast 1, soul blast 3, bind all the critical triggers that you soul blasted for the cost, choose one of your rear guards and stand it. And then this and that unit gets +5 key power for every 2 critical triggers in the bind zone. So originally, how it first worked was like Astroea Unica would bind 3, so you have 3, and then when you go to Masque, you would bind the 4th one, so you could get 10k power buff for both units. And you're basically trading off a crit for a restand, which is a okay type skill, but the crit is actually better than the restand. But thanks to like certain new cards and other support, it's actually better for you to be on this one because you now have extra stuff in comparison to just being an Astroea Unica. And that'll be explained why later, but the restand isn't too bad to finish off the game, but it isn't exactly that great without the other cards, which now we have, so it's not too bad now. Which one of them is the Almajestar Spear. So you play your Vanguard's Almajestar. So first off, you countercharge 1. This deck has been using a bit more counterblast, especially when you're on Bico Masque and another specific support card. So the countercharge is going to be very important. And then you choose 3 triggers from your drop zone and put them into your soul. And then if you remove the Astroea unit this turn, aka through Bico Masque's ability, crit +1. So basically this card lets you attain the crit, a countercharge, which is of course going to be very helpful since this deck has gone a little counterblast heavy, and recycle your triggers. The recycling your triggers is going to be very helpful because you're obviously going to be using the guard or discarding them. So just being able to recycle your triggers is just very nice, especially now this is very searchable as well. And of course, this card now adds extra pressure that Bico Masque needs. Especially in the late game, this card is just really good in the late game as well. So that's it for the grade 3 lineup. Now for the grade 2 lineup. Originally I wasn't going to run this, but I actually found this card much better than I thought. Griffin Chimera, where when placed on rearguard, if your Vanguard is Almajestar, which could mean even on your grade 2 turn, because it's grade 2, you can discard a card from your hand, look at top 2 cards of your deck, choose 1 card from one of them, put it to your hand, and then the other one you put it on the top of the deck or into your soul, and +5k. This does many things, like 1, the discard where you could put a trigger to the drop zone, which can help you with the soul charging. 2, it lets you stack back a top card of your deck while also basically cycling from your hand. If it's a crit from one of the top 2, just being able to soul charge the crit is also very nice, and it's just basically another way of choice soul charging. Yes, it basically does the same thing as Ling, except Ling has to put it from the bottom, while this one lets you put it at the top. And the 1 discard is actually very helpful as well. So I just found this card a lot more helpful than I thought, and also being a 15k beater early game is just also something really nice. And then next, I run 2 Photograph Opera Star, where on place you can counterblast 1 of your Vanguards, at least grade 3 Almajestar, to draw a card. You kind of use it for this skill sometimes, but mainly more so with the second, where during your turn, +5k for every 2 crits in the bind zone. So once again, more crits means more power, so you want the 4 anyway. But I only run 2 of these because there's another card that I want to run, which there might be some clashing in space, but I actually like the other card a little more because it's Lindogia, where when placed on rearguard, if your Vanguard is masked, you can counterblast 1 to look at top 5 card of your deck to choose up to 1 grade or less card with different name from this one and call it to rearguard, and then choose a trigger unit from drop zone and bind it. And if you have 3 or more trigger units from the bind zone, plus 10k. So basically, it's like Opera Star, except it looks at top 5 for a call, and you can bind extra crit from the drop zone, which is also very helpful if you need to. But also, the only trade-off is the extra power buff, because this one's only 10k, while the other one could be a little higher, but most of the time it's going to be 10k anyway. The only other thing is that this one has to be masked while the other one doesn't, so it is personal preference on how you want to play it, but I do still like this card, so I decided to go 2-2 split. In which finally, we run 2 copies of the Dragon Tree Wretch that will search for Masque of Hydrogram. It's just helpful. And now to the grade 1 lineup. The very new important grade 1 that helps out the deck so much is Birons. So this one, when placed from hand, you can counterblast one, look at top 3 cards of your deck to choose 1 card from one of them, put it to your hand, put 1 to soul, and put 1 to the drop. That is already pretty good, and many people use this card as a generic because of this skill. Because choice soul charge, choice to put to hand, and choice to put to drop, which also will filter out the deck, is actually not too bad. But what makes this card really good for the deck is literally the second skill, because this actually fixes some of its problems. Where it's at rearguard once per turn. If your Vanguard is Almajestar, you can Soul Blast 1, Energy Blast 3, which so far the deck doesn't even use, search your deck for 1 Astroea unit or 1 critical trigger and put it to your soul, of course shuffle your deck. And if you put a card to soul, choose a card with different name with grade less than or equal to your Vanguard from the drop zone and call it to rearguard. So much consistency here. Not only that you can directly search your deck for your key pieces, which could be your bind target or even your crit, which is going to be of course very helpful, but it also lets you refloat from the drop zone, which is another key thing because you're going to be discarding a bunch of cards, and just being able to call something from the drop zone overall is just also very good. This card just makes the deck a little more crazy than it used to be, and it just adds so much consistency that the deck actually works now. And the only unfortunate thing is that if you don't have this card, you might be screwed. But other than that, it just adds so much consistency to the deck that you just really must run it. The first skill is already very helpful, but the second skill is what really makes this card really good for the deck. Searches directly for your deck for your key pieces. And that is something the deck really absolutely needed, and I'm happy that they kind of made this card. It's just too bad the first skill is generic, so it made it expensive, but luckily I bought a split bundle, so that did help me. But other than that, you just have to run this card in this deck. And then another card that I might be running 4 of is Plutonic Prospector. So far I only have 2, but I might end up bumping this to 4 because at the end of this unit boosts a Vanguard that is Almajestar or Evil Eye. You can put this to soul, which is going to be helpful. Look at the top 7 cards of your deck for up to 1 grade 3 from one of them, reveal it and put it in your hand. You have so many grade 3 targets for this deck. It could even be your Persona Ride, your Remove Target, Masque of Hydrogram if you need it, or your Order card. It's just overall pretty helpful, but 2 has been working out pretty well, but I might bump this up to 4 because I actually found this a little more useful than I thought. And then the second skill is that you have 2 or more trigger units in the bind zone, plus 10k shield, so that's also very helpful as well. But I mainly use this mainly for the search skill, but it's also nice that it has the shield skill because thanks to your new grade 1 support, you can actually recall this back to the board, so you actually end up using kind of both skills anyway. So you have more defensive option as well. And then finally, for PGs, choose whatever PGs you want. And then trigger lineup. The OT and the very necessary, maximize your crits, because yeah, you're gonna need them. 3 draws so you can draw your key pieces faster, and finally 4 heals, 2 of them being counter heals. So that's it for this deck profile on my new updated Almajestar deck. What do you guys think of it? What other changes would you make? And what other cards would you recommend? Honestly, I really love the new support. It fixes a lot of problems that this deck had, mainly with the consistency of getting it from your deck. And now with the new support, it's just very good. This deck actually can function pretty well. Of course, the deck still has some problems here and there, like needing a little bit more consistency, but with the new support, it's still just very helpful. As long as you kind of get it, the deck kind of just works out well. But in that, there's really not much to say about it other than basically increase the power and just a huge improvement in the deck that it needs. But in that, that's it for this, and see you all next time.